pilot's job is to land a plane safely no matter how worse and unexpected the situation gets. Scary and terrifying, or outright deadly. Here are some of the most unbelievable landings in the history of aviation that will shock you to your core. Chassis malfunction. What would you do if someone told you that your plane's chassis was defective and wouldn't open? You'd probably freak out, right? Well, that's exactly what happened on a flight in Astana, the capital of Kazakhstan. Imagine being on board with 116 passengers and 5 crew members, and the front wheels won't come down. It's like a bad dream. But the pilot didn't panic. Instead, he made a gutsy call to land without the front wheels. The plane hit the runway and slid for a few hundred feet, but no one got hurt. The pilot deserves a standing ovation for his cool-headedness. Next time you fly, make sure to check the chassis before boarding. Better safe than sorry. The smoke-filled flight. Picture this. You're on a long flight from London to New Zealand, and suddenly the plane is filled with smoke, and flames are coming out of all 4 engines. That's what happened on this flight. The co-pilot and crew tried their best to restart the engines, and at an altitude of 13,500 feet, the 4th engine started and the other 3 followed suit. Talk about a miracle! The plane made an emergency landing in Jakarta. In all, 248 passengers and 15 crew members were safe and sound. Who knew flying could be such an adventure? Hurricane scare. Have you ever been on a plane during a hurricane? It's not for the faint-hearted. This plane heading to Hamburg had to land during Hurricane Emma, and it was a bumpy ride. The winds were so strong that they pulled the plane off course, and the pilot had to fight hard to keep it steady. But when the plane touched down, disaster struck. The winds tipped the plane, and the left wing hit the runway at 150 miles per hour. Ouch! But the pilot didn't give up. He managed to regain control and take off again. After circling the airports for a while, he landed the plane despite the damage. Now, that's what you call a skilled pilot. If you have any wild flying stories, share them in the comments. And if you think pilots are amazing, hit that like button. Also, check out Jelly Gummy Bear's channel for some fun experiments, cool life hacks, and exciting adventures. Trust us, you won't regret it. The Siberian Miracle. Have you heard about the miraculous landing in Siberia? It's the kind of story that gives you chills. Imagine being on a plane flying to Moscow and then suddenly losing all power. No instruments, no fuel, no control! Yikes! But those pilots from Alrosa were made of steel. They searched for a landing spot and found a tiny cement airstrip called Ishma. The thing is, it was barely long enough for an 80-ton plane, but they didn't give up. They managed to land the beast, but then crashed into the trees because they couldn't brake. Ouch! Thankfully, nobody was hurt. It's amazing what you can achieve with a little luck and some good old-fashioned skills. Hats off to those pilots. Lukla Airport. Are you now ready for a trip to Nepal? Hold on tight as we witness this pilot take on the trickiest runway in the world at Lukla Airport. Oops, first attempt, no luck. But don't worry, we'll stick around for round 2. And he did it! Nicely done, buddy. Now, let's talk about taking off at Lukla. That's a whole other ball game. It's like trying to ride a unicycle on a tightrope while juggling watermelons. But hey, these pilots make it look easy peasy. Istanbul chaos. Let's now head to Istanbul. Imagine being on a Turkish Airlines flight ready to explore the sights of Italy. And suddenly, your plane starts to spin out of control. Yikes! In 2015, Flight 1878 was coming in for a landing, but things went haywire when the pilot noticed a fire in the engine. The plane did a complete 180-degree spin, causing some serious drama on the runway. Fortunately, no one was injured, and the pilots blamed the turbulence from the plane that landed before them. Carolina skies. Now, let's travel to Swain County, North Carolina, where the skies are usually clear and serene. But one day, in July 2022, things took a different turn. Pilot Vincent Frazier was enjoying a family trip when he realized his plane's engine wasn't getting any fuel. But no worries, he handled it like a pro and brought the aircraft safely down to Route 74. And get this, he flew over 2 cars and landed right in the center lane. What a landing! British Airways Flight 9. Get ready for the story of the century. British Airways Flight 9 had a run-in with a cloud of volcanic ash back in 1982. All 4 of the plane's engines stopped working. And that's not a situation you want to be in. But Eric Moody, the captain of the flight, had nerves of steel. The plane was gliding towards Jakarta with almost zero visibility. But Eric managed to restart one engine and land the plane safely. It might not have been the destination they were aiming for, but it was better than crashing into a volcano. Thanks for tuning in, folks. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join me for more thrilling stories. Between 2 trees. Some pilots out there believe that landing the plane safely without any harm to life is the only priority. It doesn't matter where the landing has taken place. It could be a river, a beach, or between 2 trees. This next plane's engine suddenly stalled, and the plane started to lose altitude. The pilot radioed in for an emergency landing. They must have been inspired by Sully. As people started thinking of the worst, the pilot had everything in control. He was cool as a cucumber. The pilot performed a perfect landing in a field between 2 trees. Wow! That's some Top Gun level stuff right there. Sure, there was some damage to the aircraft. Well, extensive damage. But who cares about that? British Airways 2276. Imagine this. You're all buckled up, sipping on a drink, and getting ready for takeoff, when suddenly, the plane bursts into flames! That's exactly what happened to the passengers of British Airways Flight 2276. But thanks to the quick thinking of pilot Chris Hankey, everyone on board survived. He saw the problem and slammed on the brakes, calling for help at the same time. When he realized that help wouldn't arrive in time, he took charge of the situation and led an emergency evacuation. It was a heart-stopping moment, but thanks to Chris, everyone was able to escape. And the best part? He retired after the incident, thinking it was a sign that it was a time to hang up his wings. Talk about going out with a bang! Tu-154M. Next, we have the Tupolev Tu-154M that took off from Vladivostok, Russia in 2010. It was flying towards Moscow when things started to go haywire. The plane's navigation and fuel systems were kaput, leaving it flying blind with only 30 minutes of usable fuel. Plus, the radio wasn't working, and the pilot couldn't even shout, "Mayday! Mayday! Yates!" But hold on to your seatbelt, folks, because the pilot managed to land the plane safely at Zima Airport. Sure, it was a bumpy landing that went through trees, mud, and bushes, but nobody was even scratched. That pilot deserves a medal. Hats off! You ever watch some video and just think, how could that be possible? Well, this is actually one of those videos. The clip shows that the guy lost his engine right on the runway at the beginning of a Formula One air race. Embarrassing as it was, he signaled the crew to get him out, but the communication didn't come through. And then, suddenly, this happened. A plane came from behind at lightning-fast speed and almost blew the pilot's head off. Wow, I never thought I'd see an airplane accident like this in my lifetime. But luckily, everyone was safe. The plane didn't break, but the pilot's ego did. Skydiving mishap. If you're looking for an adrenaline rush, skydiving might just be the ticket. But these 17 skydivers got more than they bargained for when their plane barely made it off the ground. The pilot did his best to get the plane back to the airport, but a passing skydiver had other ideas, and the plane took a tumble. Luckily, all 17 skydivers and the pilot walked away without a scratch. We can only imagine the sheer terror they felt as the plane cruised just a few feet above the ground. And assuming all 17 skydivers had their GoPros recording, there are probably more angles of this crash than a Kardashian family photo shoot. But hey, if you're going to crash, you might as well do it in a beautiful California vineyard, right? Just kidding. Please don't crash. Singapore Airlines SQ368. It was a dark day in June 2016 when Singapore Airlines flight SQ368 ran into some serious engine trouble. The crew thought they had things under control when they shut down the right engine and headed back to Singapore. But unfortunately, there was a crack in the fuel oil heat exchanger that caused fuel to leak all over the engine, including the core and fan duct. When the pilot brought the plane into land, the fuel ignited and turned the aircraft into a fireball. It was crazy to watch. But the 222 passengers on board were trapped inside with flames at their windows for 5 whole minutes before the fire was put out. It's amazing to think that nobody was hurt. The footage of the fireball looked like something out of a movie, but we're just glad everyone made it out alive. First timer. The first flight is always the hardest. While many pilots actually enjoy their first time more than anything else, this Chinese student pilot wasn't really too thrilled. The armature pilot was flying a Cessna plane for the very first time. You can see clearly that he didn't know what he was doing. The guy ended up hitting 2 signs in a wide open field before crashing. What a horrendous first flight, right? Maybe he should stop trying. He must have been sad about the plane for a second. But don't worry, his rich daddy will buy him a new one. Hopefully with better GPS this time. What would you do in such a situation? Let me know in the comments below. Pan Am Flight 6. You're about to hear a story that will make you believe in miracles. Pan Am Flight 6 is one for the history books, and for all the right reasons. Back in 1956, Richard Ogg was piloting the Boeing 377 Strato Cruiser from Honolulu to San Francisco. But things didn't go exactly according to plan. 2 of the engines failed and the propeller malfunctioned. So you can imagine the panic that must have set in. But Richard wasn't about to give up that easily. He told everyone to move to the front of the plane, circled for hours until daylight, and then made a smooth descent into the ocean. No big deal, right? The tail broke off. The plane almost sank. But all 31 passengers survived. Richard was a real hero that day, and we're sure you'll agree. Air Canada 143. Imagine you are halfway through your trip going at 800 miles, thousands of feet up in the air, and you run out of fuel. Air Canada Flight 143 was the first plane in Canada to use the metric system for fueling. Unfortunately, some ground crew didn't get the memo and fueled the plane using the old system, which resulted in the plane taking off with less than half the fuel it needed. Oh boy! But thanks to the captain, Robert Pearson's knowledge of flying gliders and the co-pilot's familiarity with the Gimli airstrip, they were able to make an emergency landing. Sure, the plane's nose was scraped along the tarmac, but everyone on board walked away without a scratch. Captain Pearson, you're a legend. You deserve a movie! The miracle on Scandinavian Airlines 751. Okay, so you know those videos where people survive the most insane accidents? Well, Scandinavian Airlines Flight 751 was one of those moments. Back in December 1991, the plane hit the ground hard and crashed in a forest. You might think it's the end of the story, but wait until you hear the rest. All 91 passengers on board survived. That's right, nobody died. It was like a Christmas miracle. The whole thing started when the ice under the wings broke off and went straight into the engines, which shut them down right after takeoff. But pilot Steven Rasmussen had some quick thinking and managed to get the plane into a nosedive, then leveled it out for a long glide before hitting the ground. If he hadn't done that, it would have been game over. Hats off to him for his heroism. JetBlue 292. We've all had those moments where we feel like we're hanging on by a thread. But the passengers on JetBlue Flight 292 took that feeling to a whole new level. The plane's front wheels were locked in a sideways position, making it impossible to land without sparking a fire. And to make matters worse, the passengers could see news reports covering their dire situation on the TV screens in the plane. But pilot Scott Burke wasn't going to let that stop him. He circled the plane for 3 hours to turn off as much fuel as possible before making his final descent. And then he did the impossible. He brought the rear wheels down first and then gently lowered the nose to the ground. There was some smoke and a few flames, but everyone on board made it out unscathed. Talk about a white-knuckle ride. Desert emergency landing. Imagine cruising through the Mojave Desert, enjoying the scenery, when suddenly your engines stall. Yeah, no thank you. But for Mark and Nicole Delulo, that was their reality. Mark, an aviation maintenance business owner, was testing some recent work on his Beechcraft Sundowner when the engine failed. With nothing but desert below them, Mark had to make an emergency landing and hoped he could maintain radio contact in the vast nothingness. His wife Nicole recorded the whole thing as they landed in a cloud of dust. It may not have been the smoothest landing, but hey, they both walked away without a scratch. And, luckily for them, the San Bernardino Fire Department flew in to save the day. Maybe next time they'll stick to driving through the desert instead of flying over it. The river landing. Up next is the famous landing on the Hudson River. Now, landing on a river might sound like a scene out of a movie, but it actually happened to some lucky passengers on a New York to Seattle flight. In fact, a movie was made about the incident. The aircraft got attacked by a group of birds. No, not the ones from that movie. Which fried the engines and caused the plane to catch fire. The pilot was the experienced Sully Sullenberger, and he used his 30 years of flight expertise at this very crucial moment. The only option left was to land on the Hudson River, which the captain did like a total pro. Luckily, everyone survived and even got rescued by lifeguards. What an adventure it must have been. If you haven't seen this movie, you really need to. Beach landing. Now, we all love a good beach day, but have you ever been on a beach where planes land and take off just a few feet away? Just imagining such a thing is hard. But what this video has shown us is that always expect the unexpected. Maho Beach on the island of San Martin is one such place. It's right next to an international airport with a super short runway. So, planes have to land and take off at a low altitude. Sometimes they fly just 10 meters above the ground, which can definitely make your heart race. It's a great spot for plane spotting, but maybe not the most relaxing beach day. Would you ever want to go there? Let me know in the comments. British Airways Flight 38. Here's a story that will make you think twice about flying in the winter. British Airways Flight 38 was making its way from Beijing to London in 2008 when disaster struck. Ice had formed in the fuel and blocked the oil heat exchanger, causing the right engine to fail. The plane crashed 1,000 feet short of the runway, and it was a mess! The landing gear was torn off and some passengers were injured. But the good news is, everyone survived. The European Aviation Safety Agency made some modifications to the engine to prevent it from happening again. We'll leave the flying to the experts, but it's still amazing to think that we can travel around the world in a metal bird. The Courchevel experience. Every pilot in the world knows that the most challenging airport out there is Courchevel. If you're not familiar with this, get ready to have your mind blown. As you approach the landing, you will realize that there is no go-around when landing at Courchevel. Yes, you heard that right. All pilots have just one chance to land. That's it. Oh, and not every pilot is allowed to land planes here. Only the most experienced pilots are permitted to do so. In this clip of the same runway, can you hear that awful squeal of the wheel? He just made a French kiss to snow on a beautiful touchdown day. Wow, that's a really deep kiss. No worries, everyone on the plane made it out safely. That's it, guys. I will see you again with another video. Until then, check out my other videos.